Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has a lot of tracks, 48 of them in fact, and I think we can all agree that some of them are pretty easy. There's Excite Bike Arena, Mario Circuit, and Water Park just to name a few, but there are definitely a lot of them that can be extremely hard, especially on 200cc. And if you haven't completely learned the track, you'll probably have a lot of issues. And remember, this isn't the top 10 best tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, it's the top 10 hardest. And this list is based on my feelings of how hard the tracks are, and how hard they are to the average player. But just remember, this is my opinion and not everyone will share this opinion. So let's get on to number 10. At number 10 we have Yoshi Circuit. This track is near the bottom of the list because it's not that hard to learn once you've played it enough, but there are definitely some hard sections in it. Especially the middle section, because if you don't know this section very well, the twists and turns can be very difficult to maneuver around. Another thing that made me put this track on the list is the waterfall shortcut at the beginning of the course. It's not very difficult with the mushroom, but many people don't know how to pull it off without one. When playing online, I always see so many people attempt the shortcut and miss. And even though it isn't too hard to learn, its effect on online play is what puts this course on the list. At number 9 we have Rainbow Road. No, not the N64 one. No, not the SNES one. The bad one. Yeah, that's right, I said it. I don't think this is a very good Rainbow Road, but it is definitely a hard one. It starts off hard right off the bat, with probably one of the hardest 200cc turns in the game. Brake drifting is essential here, and even when you brake drift, it doesn't guarantee that you can finish the turn safely. The ending part is difficult as well. It's not very hard to stay on the course, but it is difficult to take the best lines. And even though the shortcut isn't that difficult, it can be easy to make a mistake in the middle of a chaotic race. And if you don't take the shortcut, you might as well just fall off, because taking the shortcut saves a lot of time. At number 8 we have DK Jungle. This track might seem simple at first, and it doesn't have any particular section that makes it extremely difficult, but I think the entire track as a whole is constantly pressuring the player because of how narrow the road is. This makes it so that even though the turns aren't very hard, any mistake can send you flying into a wall or off the course. The ending section with the two bridges isn't that hard either to do by itself, but since it's a straightaway, it makes players very vulnerable to be hit by items and knocked off the narrow platform. Overall, DK Jungle's claustrophobic layout is what gets it on the list. At number 7 we have Bowser's Castle. This track has a lot of obstacles and difficult turns, but it also has a lot of easy parts and easy turns, so that's why it's still a little bit lower on the list. The track starts off with a bunch of 90-degree turns that will easily send you flying into the wall if you're not prepared for them. Next, the course sends you off 2 ramps right into a big spiky ball swinging side to side, which can be very difficult to avoid if you're not careful. But the thing is, as hard as the beginning half of the course is, everything after is pretty easy. Come on, dodging Bowser's Fist is not even that hard. And that is what makes this course easier overall and why it's closer to the bottom of the list. At number 6 we have Grumble Volcano. Now this is a course that definitely requires focus, a lot of focus. If you let your guard down for 1 second, that could easily ruin your whole lap or even your whole race. There aren't very many turns in this course, but the ones that there are very unforgiving, and with an abundance of places to fall off, mushrooms must be used carefully and wisely. And even though it's difficult at the beginning of the race on the first lap, on the second and third laps the track starts to fall apart, and the road keeps getting more and more narrow, which makes it easier and easier to fall off. Grumble Volcano is a course that suits its name well, and it's one of the hardest in the game. Up next, at number 5, we have Piranha Plant Slide. Piranha Plant Slide probably has more obstacles than any other track, and these can be very hard to avoid on 200cc. Piranha Plant Slide also has a lot of turns at 90-degree angles that make many of the obstacles even harder to avoid. The beginning section is pretty hard, having to avoid the Piranha Plant and then prepare yourself for a 90-degree turn, but the section after that is even harder. You have to drift off of the ramp if you want to have any chance of surviving the next section. But even if you do that, the pipes on the ground can completely throw you off from there. Once you're past the middle part though, there really aren't too many challenges after that. The ending is a little bit difficult, but it's not as difficult as some of the other parts of some of the other courses, and that's why this course is about in the middle of the list. At number 4 we have Bone Dry Dunes. Desert levels in Mario Kart games are usually pretty basic, just look at Desert Hills or Dry Desert. But Bone Dry Dunes has a lot more to it, and it's also one of the hardest tracks in the game. What makes this track so hard are the changes in the surfaces that occur frequently throughout the track. This makes you have to change the way you're driving every time the path changes from road to sand. The faster path you can take near the end messes a lot of players up because the turn going into it requires the players to get around the piranha plant in the middle and turn onto the path, all while dealing with the slippery sand below them. And finally, at the end of the track, after a pretty tight turn at the beginning of the cave, you have the option to take a pretty big shortcut at the end, but it's harder than it looks because you have to aim for the gap in the bones that are blocking you while adjusting to the slippery sand. Bone Dry Dunes is a very hard course, but if you just settle for the slower routes, it'll be a little easier, which is why it's not even higher on the list. At number 3 we have Cheeseland. Oh, Cheeseland, the land of cheese. Personally, I really like Cheeseland, but I know some people who really hate it, and their hate for it isn't without justification, because this course is really hard. There isn't too much risk of falling off, but with a mix of sharp turns and slippery ground, you definitely want to know how to drift brake before playing this course on 200cc. I think the middle and ending sections are what give people the most trouble on this track. The big U-turn that happens about halfway through the course is really hard to take good lines on, and if you aren't prepared for the glider ramp after, you'll probably either go off the road or hit the chain chomp because there's a pretty sharp turn after the ramp. The reason Cheeseland is so high on my list is because there really aren't any easy parts, so I think it deserves a high spot for its consistently difficult layout. At number 2 we have Hyrule Circuit. This is a course that wouldn't seem too hard on 100cc, but when the speed is cranked up to 200, it really picks up on the difficulty level. The beginning is pretty easy, but that's the only easy part you're going to get from this course. The first difficult part is in the castle. You have to get around a big circular platform in the center, which shouldn't seem too hard, but on 200cc it's very easy to hit a wall or get completely turned around. Not to mention the fact that you'll be going even faster because of the long turn that you would definitely get an Ultra Mini Turbo from before that section. If you happen to make it out of the castle, the next section might even be more difficult. If you don't decide to take the shortcut, you'll be taking a path that's a little bit easier, but if you do take the shortcut, you can be easily thrown off for the next section, which is why it's one of the hardest shortcuts to do perfectly. And in my opinion, this is one of the hardest sections in the game to do well. If you're playing this track online, you'll see so many people getting stuck here. To be honest, that section alone could have put this track on the list, but that with the castle section are the main reasons why Hyrule Circuit has such a high spot on this list. At number 1, we have Neo Bowser City. Neo Bowser City has a more subtle difficulty level, and it's similar to Cheeseland in that way, but it is number 1 for a reason. This course is at number 1 just because pretty much every turn you take in the course is hard. Many of them aren't extremely difficult or anything, but they're all hard to take the best lines on, which makes it pretty easy to lose time on players who are more experienced and know the course better. There is one section of the course though, and this section of the course is extremely hard. This section is probably the hardest section in the game. The course is already very slippery, but when that slipperiness is put onto a narrow bridge with so many sections to fall off, it makes a very difficult section, and is one that I see people struggling with the most online. And that's the main reason this course is number 1. First of all, it has that very difficult section in the middle, but then every other turn in the track is just very hard as well. Not quite as hard as the middle section, but hard enough to make it a consistently difficult course that is very hard to master. What did you think of my list? Let me know which courses you think are the hardest in the comments section below. And let me know if you'd like to see a top 10 best Mario Kart tracks in the future. And with that, I hope you enjoyed the video, Like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you next time.